Our first tipping point tonight, what happens now that the Congressional Budget Office came back after reviewing the Republicans' Obamacare repeal bill and said people are going to lose their health insurance coverage when Obamacare is repealed? This is what the Democrats are waiting for. They're hoping to use people as political pawns. Democrats want to be able to point to Republicans and say, you are the reason millions of people lost their coverage. But the thing is, that's not the whole story. Liberals live in a bubble here. They choose to ignore that these people they're talking about in blue-collar America, working men and women who voted for Donald Trump because the policies of Barack Obama were crushing them, they're the ones who have shouldered the enormous burden of Obamacare coverage these past 7 years. Skyrocketing premiums, deductibles so high they're paying out of their pocket for health care anyway, coverage that's only coverage technically and anything but affordable. Take a look.
George, the bill probably can be fixed, but it's going to take a lot of carpentry on that framework. As it's written today, this bill in the House of Representatives cannot pass the Senate, and I believe it would have adverse consequences for millions of Americans, and it wouldn't deliver on our promises to reduce the cost of health insurance for Americans. So I would say to my friends in the House of Representatives with whom I serve, do not walk the plank and vote for a bill that cannot pass the Senate and then have to face the consequences of that vote.
Joining me now, host of the Andrea Kaye radio show, Andrea Kaye, and Democratic strategist Joel Payne. Andrea, Joel, good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
You too.
All right, guys. Andrea, let me start with you for this question of the day today. And the question is, what happens now that the Congressional Budget Office came back? They reviewed the Republicans' Obamacare repeal bill, and they said that people are going to lose their health insurance coverage when Obamacare is repealed, if this bill is passed as is.
Well, are they going to lose their insurance, Liz, or are they going to choose to give up their insurance? Are they going to choose to let this policy that they currently have go and wait to see what free market solutions come about? Or maybe they're just going to, choose to not have insurance at all, because in America, we're supposed to have the freedom to decide what products we purchase and what we don't. And when it comes to the CBO themselves, is this the same organization that has been a little off in their predictions in the past? I think they told us that at one point they said 21 million would end up on Obamacare. Then they upgraded it to 22 million, and then last reports only 10.4 million were signed up under Obamacare. I mean, the CBO to me, Liz, is looking a little as accurate in their predictions as Nostradamus, who said at one point that California was going to end up in the ocean.
Joel, and let me turn to you on this, because it seems to me, and I know that Democrats would say that this sounds like a heartless thing to say, but isn't this in a sense inevitable when the government hands out entitlements, hands out these subsidies like they did with Obamacare? Isn't it inevitable that some people will lose that specific coverage, not access to coverage, but that specific government-sponsored coverage once Obamacare is repealed?
What was always inevitable was the fact that Republicans never prioritized this. They never thought this through. This was never important to them, the idea of insuring millions of Americans to make sure that they had health insurance. They never saw that as a priority. So you had 7, 8 years to come up with a plan, and they didn't. And now they're at a place where they can't even agree in their own caucus. They do not think this is important. And that's something that Trump voters should think about. They should think about whether or not they want to support a president and an administration that thinks it's not that important for them to have life-saving health care. That's a fundamental choice that a lot of voters are going to have to make.
Right, and I mean, I don't disagree with you on the criticism of the Republicans not coming up with a plan in 7 to 8 years. I'm very openly Republican here. I dislike Obamacare. I think it's shocking that our elected officials, Republicans, don't have a better plan than this. I don't think that this plan is adequate. I would push back just a little bit in the sense that the prioritization here, or basically your allegation that Republicans don't care about people being covered, I mean, the purpose of Obamacare theoretically was to get everybody covered, but even after it's been rolled out for this many years, there are still 28.5 million Americans that don't have coverage, even with a mandate. So intentions aside, I mean, this wasn't a solution that worked, Obamacare.
Yeah, and look, I think most Democrats, and I hope that most Americans, most people who just, watch history understand that legislation is supposed to be built upon and it's supposed to be grown over time, right? I don't think anybody thought that Obamacare was finished business in 2010 when it passed. But instead of working with Democrats at that time and since then to strengthen and improve it, Republicans have really gone and they've tried to break it down and have tried to destroy it. And I think these are chickens coming home to roost now because it's their problem. It's at their steps. They have underfunded and they have undersupported this legislation. And now they're in a place where they don't have a plan. And 14 million people are going to lose health care that they have now. I understand that, you can go back and forth and say it's Obamacare, but that's the facts. 14 million people are going to lose health care.
Right, and very simply, Andrea, let me just ask you, is it fixable? Because some of the fundamentals of Obamacare, the way that it was structured, putting the burden of the costs on young people, forcing people to sign up so that they pay for older, sicker people. I mean, is that actually a solution? If there was a bipartisan, if people were willing to work together from both sides of the aisle, is there a fix for Obamacare without repealing it?
Well, is there a fix with this plan right now, or Obamacare in its original form before this GOP fix, before this repeal? Here's the bottom line. The issue that we had with Obamacare and what the American people clamored for was not a handcrafted, continued big government control over the healthcare and the insurance industry. The American people actually clamored for a repeal of Obamacare because they realized that government intervention was not the solution. And unfortunately for Joel, some of the criticisms that people are having about criticism from the Republican Party that people are having with this Obamacare 2.0 is that they are making it too much of a priority. They are trying to shove it through. It continues to provide subsidies. It continues to provide coverage for pre-existing conditions and all the things that made Obamacare so unaffordable in the first place. So really, both plans need to be, in my opinion, scrapped and fixed. And what would happen if they just did a full repeal? You know what? People could still get insurance, right? And what they could do is, in terms of things like the pre-existing conditions, why not just have subsidies for that and let everybody else and everything else be a part of the free market system?
Right, and Joel, go ahead and answer that, because I think that's an interesting point, that people elected Donald Trump because one of the staples of his campaign promises was repeal of Obamacare, but just because some conservatives, some faction of the Republican Party is unhappy with this proposal that the Republicans put forth doesn't mean that people are pivoting back and liking Obamacare. They just want it fully repealed.
No, I worked on the Hillary Clinton campaign, and believe me, I heard Donald Trump loud and clear. He didn't say repeal. He said repeal and replace. He said that he was going to replace this, and that everybody, it was almost like Oprah giving away the free car. He said everybody was going to get everything that they wanted. That's what our president said, and that's what we should hold him to. But you know what's interesting? I was working with Harry Reid when we wrote the Obamacare bill in 2010. And I remember the days when we used to have people who had cancer who couldn't get coverage, who were being thrown off of their insurance. Those days are over now. And I don't understand why Republicans have decided that this is the hill they want to die on, that this is where they want to go and cut checks and go and cut, extra money for their wealthy C-suite level friends. Why is it that on the backs of these folks, not just Democrats, but Republicans, that they want to balance the budget?
Right, and Joel, Joel, I mean, that's a huge allegation to make, that everyone who couldn't afford coverage for their cancer treatments or some such expense now has it. I mean, the fundamental part of Obamacare is that people are funneled onto Medicaid. That's really the underpinning of how it's constructed. Anyone who's read the bill or knows how the system works knows that that's the case. Of the 14 million people who've gotten coverage under Obamacare, 11.8 million of them were funneled onto Medicaid. That's the structure of the bill. And Joel, if you look at Medicaid, people are still unable to afford their treatments. I mean, people literally are dying. Not just a talking point about, people might die if we repeal. I mean, there were 79 disabled people in the state of Arkansas who were on Medicaid, who had longer wait times because there were so many able-bodied people that were put on Medicaid under Obamacare. They died waiting for coverage. I mean, Obamacare is not this magic silver bullet that solved everyone's health problems. I mean, there are winners and losers on both sides, and to suggest, I guess, that Republicans don't care about people's health and that Obamacare solved it, I mean, that's not going to solve anything.
Right. And can I jump in here, Liz, and piggyback onto that? I mean, the assertion, I'm tired of these Harry Reid talking points that Republicans want everybody to die. Obamacare did nothing. You want to talk about false promises. Obamacare did not provide any increased access to anybody's healthcare provider, the doctor or insurance. You can have an Obamacare card and still not be able to get in to see a doctor. And one of the complaints that Republicans within the party have against Obamacare Light is that it still does provide for those pre-existing conditions. And there is still a mandate involved. And oh, by the way, the CBO report just came out, and it's not a fact yet that 14 point some odd people are going to lose their insurance under this new Republican bill.
Joel, and we're out of time here, but go ahead and get the last word here.
Yeah, I don't think it's a talking point to say that the people that we met as we were consulting as we were writing this bill in 2010, they told us that this is what we needed. We didn't think that this was a final step, but we did think it was an important step. So I hope that Republicans focus on improving what's already in place instead of destroying it.
Right. I certainly hope, and I think people on both sides of the aisle can agree that we want people to be able to have access, whether it's Democrats who want it provided by the government or conservatives who want it provided by the free market. No one wants to cut off people's access to health care. Andrea, Joel, thanks so much for being here, guys. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks.